Testing, 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 testing. Looks like it's working. Okay, cool. I should probably turn off this thing. Hey. Good morning, friends, and welcome to the Legend Fiction live stream. I'm your host, Dominic, founder of the community. We're here to inspire and help indie fiction authors get those dream novels written and then talk about, well, messy things like marketing and how to grow your reach and how to find your readers and yeah, we just want to hang out and chat about all of your questions and be as helpful and as friendly as possible. Today's conversation, we're talking about feedback without damage, or basically, feedback can feel brutal. Authors shouldn't be. We shouldn't be to each other. And, well, we're going to be straight. I'm going to tell you about how legend fiction, the fiction community that I run, how we handle it, and how we're inspiring authors to double and triple their writing output, largely because we're building a culture around how to handle feedback well. So, thoughts and questions are absolutely welcome. Please jump into the chat. Let me know what you think. And we've got two guests in about 40 minutes or so. So we'll talk about their latest updates and their newest stories. And so our guests are going to be Peter, I think it's Wojcik. And he's got I think it's a new book that's coming out. So I think that'll be fun. No, actually, no, I take it back. We're talking about creators having a vocation to creativity. I think that's going to be cool. He was from another one of those speakers from that Jesuit conference that I've been referring or chatting with of late. And then after that, we've got Ken Lizzie, who is jumping on. We're talking about his book, Twilight Galaxy Decasson, I think it's his new book. So, yeah, I think those are going to be pretty fun conversations to get into. Now, if we can swing it, what I plan to do is we'll talk about this feedback topic, and then I want to share with you an article that I wrote based on something that I read on Substack. And I created a chat tool. And if I can swing it, I'll screen share and show you how to use it. And we can talk about why it can be really helpful. But the idea is to create a mythic version of yourself that's not lying, but is trying to actually get out of your own way and be humble and tell the truth about how awesome you think you are on the inside and let other people know that and why that might actually be important. So there you go. That's our menu for today. So again, if you've got questions, drop them in the chat. And of course, I'm still figuring this out. If you become a channel supporter, then I am absolutely excited to spend special time with you to do special members only content, maybe answer questions that feel a little more sensitive and just share them for members. I don't know. I'm trying to figure this out. But if you don't want to join the community and you'd like to support the channel and you'd like more of my attention on you and what you're doing, that's one way that you can get it. And I would be happy to do that. Okay, let's talk about feedback without damage. And when it comes to feedback, I have to go back to one of my earliest experiences in getting feedback for short stories, especially, for example. Um, Back in the old days, well, I was raised in a family that didn't have internet, especially not like for kids. You had the one computer like in the middle of the living room, right? And everybody had access to that, so you could always see what was going on. And so I wrote my stories out by longhand, and then we moved, and I used to punch out stories with two fingers and type them in. And then try to print them off, and I remember trying to get my music teacher to read them. Yeah, that poor guy was he survived the Second World War in Holland, and he taught me the flute for like, oh gosh, I played flute for like 7 years as a kid. Um, he must have been a teacher for like 4 years. He loved jazz. He was so good at jazz. And I tried getting him to read my stories. He was the wrong some person he sort of some way he did, or somehow he did. And uh gosh, they were violent stories about attacking dinosaurs with lightsabers. For some reason that was my thing as an early writer. And he managed to read them, and he would tell me like, "Man, I attack my chicken differently after reading these stories. They're so violent." I'm like, "Yeah, that's." I am actually running off 4 hours of sleep. For some reason last night I could not sleep. It's like they go in Minecraft, you can't rest, right? Because there's mobs nearby. Maybe that's what was going on. Couldn't rest. So I'm running on 4 hours of sleep here. But I wanted to hang out with you all anyway and try to be helpful. So then I discovered I went to an English boarding school in France, I did that for about a year. And then that's where I was allowed to go online after hours during the holidays. And I discovered an online forum for sharing stories. And this is one of those horribly designed old forums. And everybody's sharing everything. And there's people of all ages in there. There's like little to no moderation. There's stuff in there I probably should never have read. There's people in there who have no right to be creating. And there was some amazing talent that I discovered on there too. People that I liked following, and I would just sit there and just read. It was like an unending anthology of short stories and chapter stubs and so on. And so I posted my stories, a couple of the ones that I was working on in there. And what I noticed was one or two people would jump on and they would leave nice feedback. Now, there were a couple of people who jump on and like everybody always experiences, and I bet you've probably experienced this too. If you're sharing your stuff online, you always get somebody who jumps on and savages like, "Oh, I don't know, your grammar's wrong," or your um I don't know, they double down on like one specific aspect of your creativity and then just try to blow you away. Why do people do that? We'll talk about that. Like there's some psychology in there, I'm sure. How do you armor against that? That's probably a really good talking point. But there were a couple of people who did something really nice. They jumped in and they go, "Oh, you're really good at this particular, whatever it was." I think somebody complimented me on dialogue, I think is what it was. And a funny thing happened. Um, it's like, well, you know how you attract more flies with honey than with vinegar? It's the same thing with authors. And the same thing with kids, basically. So you're talking to your inner child, right? When you praise behavior, you often get more of that than when you punish behavior you don't want. Honestly, it's something that I am field testing almost daily with my own kid. I've tried this with my coworkers, and I'll try to praise the behavior that I want them to do, and I'll overlook for the time being, unless it's a glaring, the bad behavior that's just not working. If it's like just obstructing projects from getting done or whatever, then I'll address that. But if they're doing something really good, I'll praise that because I want to see more of that. And we feel good, obviously, when we get praise, and we like that. So we then obviously want to do more of that when we get praise, right? Tell me if that isn't you. Somebody tells you, "Hey, that's really good. You look good in that shirt. You look good in that sweater. I loved how you showed up early to do that thing. Your story was amazing on this one particular point." Well, what do you have me absolutely do? Praise gremlins, right? We absolutely take that little praise and we squirrel it away in the back of our mind, and makes our lizard brain so happy to be told, "Oh, you're good at this one thing." Um, gosh, hilarious story. Somebody once, I once told my kid, "I like to see a nice clean sink." And of course, what was the very next thing that was done? The sink itself was made immaculate, and all the dishes were left on the outside. Laser focused on doing a good thing. And so when somebody praised me and they go, "Hey, you're amazing at dialogue," debatable about whether I was. I have no idea about their qualifications to, you know, glaze me on anything. Doesn't matter. I took that praise to heart and I doubled down on building out, really good dialogue, which is funny because I used to be so bad at it. Used to be terrified of it. I still have memories of the first story I ever tried to write where I tried to incorporate dialogue and it was bad because I didn't know what I was doing. So that was really, really cool praise to get. And so I doubled down on that. And then I ended up getting a teacher at a writing school that I took for 2 years, also giving some feedback and some praise. So that anchored in me something when it comes to authors, which is why I don't understand how nasty and how mean people can be. This is probably being raised on, watching things like Disney and Thumper going, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say nothing at all, right? Type of one in the chat if you got that when you were a kid, if you were raised on watching that. And my parents would try to get us to follow something like that. I'm one of 8 kids raised in Australia, and we didn't always have very nice things to say at all. We're always fighting. It's part of, what do you call it? Hierarchy, dominance, and all of that fun stuff. We're 5 boys, 3 girls. Yeah, we're not speaking nice to each other. We're absolutely um, talking badly about each other to start fights and get into trouble, and against each other, field test what we want to do, and so on. So so when you go to you post and you post stuff online, and then people actually take time out of their day to sit and dunk on you for something that you put time and effort into doing, I genuinely don't understand. For me, I have so much more going on in my life. I don't have time. When somebody puts out something crap, I don't have the time or the energy or the interest to sit there and read them the riot act about why they're an awful human being or whatever it is, why they're this and this. It's like, you seriously have nothing else going on in your life. Well, unfortunately, that's the problem. They probably don't have anything else going on in their life. We've also created, there is this, I think it's also a funny and annoying truth that it used to be that the village idiots would all be kind of like quietly sort of ignored. And then unfortunately, now they're all online and they don't have jobs. And so they're able to just do anything. Now, that's not to say that sometimes we don't merit constructive criticism and feedback, especially if we've got a big head on our shoulders and a big idea, big ego about ourselves, and our work isn't actually that good. This is genuinely true about a lot of us. We're actually not as good as we think we are. Sometimes we're way better than we think we are, and we hold ourselves back. So we do a little honesty gut check. And you actually got to do that. You ask your friends, you're not the ones who mercy read your stuff because you're always begging them, but like actual other authors or the people who are good at it. That's kind of why we built our own sort of high trust writing communities where you can actually get that kind of feedback. More on that in a bit. Let's go back to why people talk negatively. They're crushing, they're crippling, because we got to armor up a little bit against this. Um, if you're Christian, we've got this whole armor of truth thing that everybody loves to talk about. But I'll tell you what, that one metaphor of the helmet of truth, it's I suspect it might be easier for guys than it is for girls, maybe. Um, there's this lady that I'm fascinated to follow, and I interviewed her, which was really amazing. Her name's Alison Armstrong. She talks about this one thing that guys have, which is a 5-step insulation sort of armor process against feedback. Most guys, probably. Um, and women apparently have different mechanisms, or they just don't have this mechanism at all, but guys have it, which is when we get feedback, first thing we do is we decide, okay, we have like layers of armor, 5 of them. I don't know if I can remember them all. We have a couple of layers of armor. One of them being, do I trust that what you have to say, or do I trust you're a credible person? That's the first thing. Before we even get to what you're having to say about us, do I trust that you're actually qualified to give me any sort of feedback? And if no, I don't care what comes next. Now, if yes, then comes the second gate. I think the second gate might be, do I agree with what you say? Is it an accurate indication or representation of whatever I've done or I've got going on? If I don't think it's accurate, I'm going to ignore it. So you might be credible, but I disagree with your assessment. So I'm going to ignore it. The third one is, if I think that you are credible and I do agree with your assessment, do I think, you know, uh, gosh, what is it? I can't remember the rest of them, but it's like one of them was, is it going to be worth my time to implement? And if I decide, nope, not worth my time, then I will not do it. And then the last one is, if it makes it all the way through, then I finally accept, okay, it's worth my time. I'm going to implement it. You're a credible person. That's good feedback. Then for most guys, goes on the list. I will get to it when I can, when it's part of my priorities. And I just think that was so funny to have that broken down because I'm exactly like that. Now, uh, if somebody drops like a nasty comment on YouTube, for example, or on a blog, okay, it hurts for a minute, and then I'm able to get past it, largely because I'll just decide, I don't know who you are. You could be some greasy somebody sitting in a basement with nothing going on in your life, and you have failed dreams, and all you're doing is going around dunking on somebody else. It could be true. Or I could be genuinely bad, and you're an incredible published author, and I deserve everything that you're saying. That could be true too. But if I have no idea who you are, there's no reason to take you seriously. Could be a bot, could be a troll, and all of those things are real too. So if you're putting stuff out online, you do need to have like kind of like a helmet against ideas trying to come in that will end up dissuading you. Couple of short little comments here. Hi, Victor. Good to see you, friend. He says, yeah, feedback is a tough topic. I look at feedback like data points in a cloud of data. The more data points you have, the more likely that's accurate ish. You are way more maybe intellectual, or you have probably more intellectual safeguards, firewalls in your head than I do. I think I'm probably more emotional. You go on to say, it depends on how willing you are to honestly evaluate and listen to feedback. And that can be absolutely true. There is nothing kind of more awful than a creator or someone who is so entitled and delusionally self confident about how good they are. They don't do well with feedback. Now, there's one thing about having a clear firewall up against bad feedback, and there's another thing about just not being very good at all and just, you know, you've got your hype squad that always tells you you're so good, or your, chat goes, "Wow, what a brilliant response," and so, yeah, those kind of people, like, I don't even unless they literally have to pay me for me to tell them exactly what I think, because there's no way they're gonna take anything seriously, so you just keep scrolling and you just keep moving on. Yeah, Victor, you say, "Got a big ego, but also a healthy imposter syndrome." And there's a whole nother conversation. We talked about imposter syndrome and another thing. Again, you gotta be good. Gotta be good to have an imposter syndrome, and I've seen some of your writing, Victor, it is good. Um Helmet of Truth is where I was trying to go. I can't speak for ladies. If you are in the chat and if you're watching this replay, how are you handling this? It's so much tougher. We have another comment. Atlas of Stars. Hi, friend. I come from a competitive side of the visual arts world. Learning the feedback is about the work, not about that you took a long time. Sorry, learning the feedback is about the work and not about you. That took a long time. Absolutely true. I'm still not totally sure that we ever can sort of learn to disassociate. We can learn to get faster through it. I think a good definition of resilience is how fast you bounce back after something negative happens. So I've been a designer for 25 years now, sort of. Basically, just started doing it out of high school and kept right on going. And I always take feedback personally. But if I can, a mental trick, which is exactly like what you're saying, Atlas of Stars, mental sort of trick is to honestly decide, am I accomplishing the goal I set out to achieve? If you go, am I a good person? Am I valuable? Is this an indication of my value? You will be stuck in a mental spiral because we're insanely hard judges on ourselves, unless you're delusionally self confident, and then you can't hear what anybody else has that's positive to tell you. So, humility is always a good thing, just actually being real. But if you can, like, for example, with work, step up alongside with your client and you've both agreed together, here's the goal we want to meet together. And then the client goes, well, this doesn't meet the goal. I'm not happy with this. Then we can be like, I need a minute. And you go take a minute, sort of calm down. And then you come back and go, okay, maybe I over creatived the thing, which is what I'll do sometimes. Usually when I get stuck designing something and it's like I'm over designing it, it's because I've missed the brief. I've missed the point. I've missed the audience. I've missed the goal I wanted to reach. I've missed the deadline, the time frame, stuff like that. And so the client can be right. And sometimes the client has no idea what they want and they just want what they want. And then you realize, oh, I didn't understand this relationship very well. The goal is to make you happy, get paid, and get out. And then you can be like, okay, stop caring. Just, what you're doing, there's a little bit of armor of truth going on, right? Helmet of truth that's helping you to decide how you want to go about thinking about this. So if you have no confidence or trust in some random feedback that you're getting online, you are putting stuff out and you're hoping to hear from people. And you're hoping that they're going to have good things to say that's not just sort of puff praise. Um, then you'll pay attention and you'll listen because they could actually be your readers. And you definitely want to cultivate a community and uh, take what your readers have to say into account. Like the folk who comment on, you know, this channel, I try to take it into account unless they go off on something that I don't think is true or right. And then I'll be like, well, thanks for the comment. You're helping the algorithm. I appreciated that you felt so compelled to take time out of your day, precious time, to leave a negative comment or how disappointed you were in my opinion or my ideas. I'm not saying all this, it's in my head. But like, thank you so much because the mere fact that you've added content below my video is actually going to help the algorithm. So if you can kind of keep like a firewall between your feelings or your sense about something. Now, here's the other thing, and we'll get back to feedback in a second, but first feedback is your layer of feedback. What do you think about what you've done? And if you're proud of it, if you think you did a good thing, then try to own that. You believe in it and keep going and recognize nobody else is going to believe in it. Maybe not for a while. So you do that for yourself. You need to see or kind of hear that for yourself. So own that. I think that's important. Even if nobody else ever. That's where there's like sometimes it's helpful to have a little bit of delusional self-confidence, like, hey ma, look, no hands as you're going off a ramp. Do you believe you can do it, boy? Well, then you better stick that landing because ain't nobody else is gonna be on that bike saving you. So if you're gonna get out there and you're gonna craft a book or something, half of you is watching like, hey, are we gonna survive this? And you're like, we're awesome. We've got this. I honestly want to make a t-shirt. You know that quote from Oppenheimer that goes, what is it? Now I have become death, destroyer of worlds from what is it, the Mahabharata or something? Um, so I thought it'd be fun to have for authors like, now I am become awesome, a creator of worlds, right? I think that'd be funny. But you're taking on a massive thing, so you need to give your own positive feedback. Do you believe in what you're doing? Do you think it's awesome? Do you wish it existed in the world? And if nobody ever knew about it, is the world a better place because it's in it? If the answer is yes, keep on going. Somebody will think like, similarly at some point. Well, now let's get to feedback from other people. Good feedback can be absolutely incredible because it can just be like rocket fuel that inspires you to want to keep getting better at what you're already doing. So instead of asking for negative feedback, this is kind of a little thing if you run a business out there. I saw this about a year ago and I started practicing it immediately, and it's actually been kind of cool. You might say it's a little bit manipulative. Maybe. Go with me for a second. So normally when you ask for feedback, right, as a business, you go, "How could we improve? Tell us." Somebody will always come up with uh, some way that you're doing badly. If you own a hotel, you run an event, you run a restaurant, you sell a book online. If you ask for feedback, how could we improve? Okay. It's like your wife, walks up to you, your friend walks up to you, and you go, "Hey, can I ask you a serious question for a minute? Be real with me. How can I improve as a human being?" Right? You don't ask that kind of question to just anybody. You really only ask that kind of question to somebody you really, really trust because there's a risk of an answer you don't like. There's a risk of it hurting. I mean, heck, there's a risk of you hearing the truth and not liking that truth and then never actually changing your life and leveling up to meet that change because I don't know, you weren't ready for it, you didn't like it. So that's a question that you really save for somebody you really trust. Frankly, it's somebody that you pay to tell you because, well, you trust them, they're a professional. So, what's another thing you can do? Here's something that I found that's actually really cool. You don't ask for negative feedback, you ask for positive feedback. Hey, what am I doing that's really good? What did you love most about your experience? Because if people give you that information, that's actually really helpful. Because sometimes people have a really good experience, and you ask them, where did we suck? And then they'll go, I mean, they might actually say you didn't, you were amazing. But most times people will go, well, I mean, I don't know, my knife was dirty when you served it on the plate, or they'll make up something because you've now asked them to be in a position of judgment. And there's a little thing in us that kind of likes to take somebody a peg down or, you know, break them down a little bit. And that's not always a good thing. May not always be helpful. So instead, if you ask them, hey, what did you love most about, let's say you're posting your story online or your chapter, hey, comment the part you loved most, right? If you're posting stuff online, I'm going to guess you're already doing some basic stuff already, like running it through Grammarly. For example, having chat run through it and go, where are some major flaws I should pay attention to? Any grammatical issues that I should pay attention to? That's kind of baseline stuff that should be handled before stuff gets published online. So by the time something goes up online, you're not actually looking for grammar level edits. I'm assuming you're looking more for structural edits, and it can be more helpful, I think. Tell me what you think. I'm working through this, this is exactly what I'm doing. You're looking for how can you get better? And one of the ways that you can do that is by asking, what did I do that was really good? What did you really enjoy? And sometimes you'll be surprised. Someone might go, oh my gosh, your world building is insane. It's mint. It's just delightful. And you're like, oh, what did I do? And then you go back and you reread that. Now what happens, right? Um, when you love the learning process, you learn it so much faster. For me, I've always loved creativity, English, history, just love it. And so I'm a sponge for it all. I will volunteer hours of my day to listen to podcasts on history, well, storytelling, mysticism, whatever. Stuff that you love is stuff that you want to learn. Whereas I completely failed Latin, chemistry, physics. I couldn't understand it. I took extra coaching from teachers during break to try to get better at it. Bombed them badly. I remember a friend, teacher once telling me, if you love something, you'll learn it better. So try to like cultivate feelings of like happiness and love while you're doing Latin 101. Now there are some people who are geniuses at this and they just love it and they absolutely hate English. And so they just are amazing at those topics. And I'm not. I couldn't make it, I couldn't love them. I don't know why. Maybe there's a magic answer out there that, maybe I psyched myself into not, but that's a whole nother conversation. And, I remember once, when I took my SATs to try to get into a year at college, and when the math portion came back and it was straight F for fail, the English side and the writing side was so strong, I ended up getting, like, a really high number. I don't remember what it was anymore, what it meant. But when I saw that, at that moment, I decided, "That's it, I'm just not ever gonna try about math anymore. I've only got limited time and attention, I'm gonna focus on what I'm good at." And I got lucky, I ended up being able to get either luck or you make your own luck, and that's another conversation for another time. So feedback. I took that as feedback. Like, Victor saying it is a data point. Um, just decide if you're happy with adding that to your data set. So here's what we've done in Legend Fiction. And we've created a community culture around positive feedback. So the first thing that you'll get when you join, for example, the community, and maybe you can practice this with everybody else as well, but um, praise the kind of behavior or the kind of activity you want to see from people instead of punishing them against it. Um, there's a time and place for negative feedback, for harsh constructive feedback, but frankly, I suspect that you only accept and internalize that when it comes from someone that you trust. Maybe somebody that you love, or somebody who has, again, you trust it because they are credible or they have the authority to tell you um, that you need to improve. So, what we do is, I like the feedback sandwich approach, which is you start with praise, include the feedback, end with praise. So in Legend Fiction, in our community, it's our cardinal rule. As soon as you join, there is no negative feedback. Now, if somebody's absolutely like, kind of begging for it because maybe they're a little more resilient, and here's where we just allow authors to kind of control their own dials. Most of us are probably more introverted. Um, I think most authors are probably more introverted in general because it's the introverts who are paying more attention to what's going on inside of us and trying to journal through that and fictionalize that out into something you can read and share to see what it is you're thinking, and then share that with other people. And so, what's going on inside of us is often stuff that we're more attuned to, more aware of. So, being kind, especially as you begin, I think is a good idea. It's kind of different maybe with something like a boot camp, and that's why we don't have, like, a boot camp approach. I'm not sure that that works for something like creativity. Um, creativity is something that emerges out of how the soul functions, so you do need specific things, like you need, discipline in your life, and you do need structures, and you do need habits because you can't rely on feelings and motivations and hype to help you reach the goals that matter to you. You need systems, you do need accountability. Now, how women do this and how men do this is going to be probably a bit different, just because of how we're wired. I've learned more recently, actually from Alison Armstrong, whom I just mentioned, testosterone is the hormone of accountability, which is probably why all of the advice that I will share will come from me as a guy, and it may not work. We've got like a tournament, for example, in our community, um, where authors clump together in groups of 4 to try to outright each other and win a title. And it's very fun. We're closing out our first quarter, testing out this tournament, see who wins. And it's interesting to see who's doing that. And some people are just burning out. Um, women don't have as much testosterone available to them as men. Just we're wired different. So it makes more sense that guys are going to tackle this or talk to ourselves or handle this or give personal feedback or want specific feedback very differently to how women do that. So to each their own, find your freedom works, find what works for you. Um, so with positive feedback, go with the feedback sandwich. And this is something you can just apply in your own life and then just see how it completely changes the dynamic. Somebody goes, "Hey, what do you think?" You could go, for example, "Wow, I love you in that." Or "That looks really nice on you." Maybe try a different color belt. I don't know. I don't know clothes. My wife gets so mad at me how I don't know clothes. But maybe this would be different, but I think it just like here's something else that just looks really nice. Right. With a story, you go, wow, that's I find something you genuine tell the truth. Don't do fluff. I love how you did this one thing. With almost every author, there's almost always something that they've done well. It could be at the level of the mechanics of the story. I like how you did the writing, the description, whatever. Somebody else might go, the narrative concept is really fun, and then they might go, instead of, again, we're not trying to be negative to tear people down. We want to be helpful and constructive to build them up. And then you go, maybe at this point, um, you can share an insight. There's a good piece of advice, which is what we practice in our community, which is don't share advice, share insight. Okay, I know it's advice, but it's helpful because advice is for everybody else. Insight is what works for you, or it's what you think. And so keeping it couched that way is helpful. So I think this thing that you did is really cool. Um, if you're looking for feedback, right? Some people are like, hey, what do you think? Drop a comment of praise that is supportive. Because what's the end goal? What's the meta level game here? If you're familiar with Simon Sinek, he talks about the infinite game. Similar process in play here. In the infinite game, he talks about there's two different kinds of games. There's games you play to win, and there's games you play to keep the game going. And so there's two examples, like a game of baseball. You play to win to beat the other team, take the trophy home. It's a closed loop. It's a closed thing with a fixed goal and there's winners and losers. But then you got the other kind of game, which is the kind of game that you play on the way home from school, for example, when we all used to play out in the street. And you keep adapting the rules of the game, right? As new kids come and some kids leave and some kids never wanted to end. And then the bus drops off a new batch of kids. And so you keep evolving the rules of the game because what's the point of the game? The actual point of the game is not just to win. The actual point of the game is to keep playing. So in legend fiction, and this is something that we encourage of everybody, the point of the game is to encourage you to keep writing. That's important. Maybe this individual little story wasn't that great, and we all start somewhere. And if you're actively trying to grow and get better, then we all just need to look at each other and recognize this is the worst it's ever going to be. Hopefully, if you're trying to get better, some people stay stuck there. Um, but it's important to encourage them to keep doing it. How much more will you learn about pottery making instead of spending 1,000 hours working on one pot to make it perfect versus creating 1,000 pots almost as fast as possible? How much better sense will you get of how to work with the materials, how to do it again and again and again, and to not get precious about the one thing, but just, okay, that was good enough, ship it, share it, post it, get rid of it, work on the new thing. We learn to apply skills. Think of the Karate Kid. If you grew up like I did watching that, wax on, wax off. Again, again. It's not find the one perfect wax. That's it. No. It's 30 times. It's repetition. It's learning to take the same skill and then you apply it through multiple instances. So that you will learn to understand how you are a thing that can apply this skill and excel at this skill, whatever the individual project is. So as soon as you're done with like one project, take a little break, put it away, start working on something new, especially if you're a prolific kind of person. If you're not that kind of person, I am not as good with with what my suggestions would be. I find it's so helpful to not get precious about your projects when you always have another one. So keep creating another one. Um, well, work on the next chapter. Get the next short story done. If you're stuck, try just writing a scene. The goal is to encourage you to keep writing. The goal is to encourage others who are doing the same thing that you're doing, who are writing in the community, for example. The goal is to encourage them to keep writing as well. So maybe all that's needed is just, I loved how you did this. That's it. They didn't ask for constructive feedback. They didn't ask for negative feedback. So, especially if they're beginning, if they're new, it's like looking at a kid doing their paintings and so on. You might not need to tell them, you know what, perspective doesn't work that way. You will never get a job as an architect. Like, that's not helpful. Instead, just tell them, look at the use of color. This is beautiful. If just double down on that skill, and you're going to keep getting better. And then as you get better at one thing, there's a bit of learning transfer that happens. Your sphere area of attention gets bigger, and you start excelling at 1 degree of another thing, 1 degree of another thing, right? Encouraging and praise is just such an easier way to encourage other people. And so that's our thing. Um, let's see if there's any notes. Let's see. So in our community, again, just recapping, feedback sandwich, no negative feedback. Praise. If somebody is like, I really want to know what's bad because I just, make me bleed, bring it to me, right? What is that, a Hitchcock reference? And okay, then people do that. We sometimes have when we have our open calls, for example, if I'm providing editing feedback, I'm in a different position compared to members of the community who see each other sort of as equals because I'm sort of the founder, or if I'm the editor for an anthology, then I might provide also feedback sandwich, but I might be more direct about let's focus on this area to improve your story, to improve your craft. Victor's got a cool comment. He says, such a tough topic. Feedback is the most valuable thing we can get, and it's also the most potentially destructive. It's true. The only thing that works is building up thick skin and evaluating it. It's painful. Well, that is true too. That is true too. So there you go, friends. What did I miss? What else comes to your mind? I think if I were to recap very quickly, you do need feedback because storytelling is a communal activity. Um, how else are you going to know that you're doing well or that people like what you've got going on? But not all feedback is equal. Some feedback is more equal than others. No, some should be ignored. So you'll need like a helmet of truth. Like, is it true? Do I agree with it? Is there anything I can do about it? And if not, let it go. Um, it does take building a thick skin. It does take experience, and it also does take belief in yourself. Maybe it takes the belief of a core group of friends who think you've got it, and you should just keep right on going. So that's valuable to have. And maybe just belief that you're doing something that's worth it and you're enjoying it. So keep right on going. Keep doing it. And if you can join a little community, doesn't have to be ours, it can be anybody's, it can be a text chain group of friends. Practice this with each other. And you know what? I'm 99% sure of a guarantee that you will see everybody improve so much faster than if you savage each other in the spirit of constructive criticism. You will see growth. And if not, you can ask for 100% refund on that free advice. All right, we have our first guest in the lobby. Let me see if I can bring him in. Hopefully the connection will hold. We've got our guest here. Hold on, I've got to change my layout. Hello, Father. Father
Hey,
Peter, how
how
are
are
you?
you?
I'm good. Can
I
you hear me
am
okay?
great. I'm hearing you just fine.
It's good to meet you. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is a live stream. We are currently live, and for those who've never heard about you, I'd love to talk about your origin story and then what happened at the recent Faith That Builds Worlds conference. I think you were at.
Correct.
Fantastic. Where are you in the country? I'm in Virginia. How's the weather treating you over there?
Well, I'm in Chicago, so my weather is, it's not predictable. Every day it changes. Actually, it changes every hour.
Really?
It's sunny at the moment. It's supposed to rain.
Okay. I think it was. Yeah, it looks overcast over on this end. So I thought it would be so. Eric Clayton introduced us, and just a bunch of incredible people that he's met, introduced me to, who are all speaking at this phenomenal conference. And everybody I've met has just been amazing. And I thought it would be wonderful to have you on to talk about, what did I say was going to be a topic? Why creators have a vocation to creativity. And I love
It's a
this
good
theme.
topic.
Yeah. So let's start there, and I don't hear about your origin story in a little bit, and your topic for the conference. But why don't we start right there? This idea of a vocation. You're somebody who's dedicated yourself to a specific vocation of, well, how would you say, spiritual service? As a priest, it's a very rigorous, very focused, very public vocation and calling. The rest of us can sort of maybe hide our vocations behind closed doors, and nobody has to know that I've got a vocation as an author or a storyteller. If I don't do anything, nobody hears about it. I know that I'm failing, maybe, or not living up to it. But someone like yourself, you put on a collar, you get up in front of people, you can't hide. There's a different level of boldness, maybe of rigor, adventure. Sort of rambling, but I'm curious, what do you think about this idea of a vocation to creativity?
Well, God is creative, right? When you think about it, you look at the diversity of, what God creates, who we are, um, and what our unique gifts and talents are. Sometimes I talk to people and I think, I would never ever come up with what you just came up with, right? Whether they're creating something or whether they're just creative folks in a very different way than I am. And so I think everybody has a vocation to creativity, right? Everybody has a unique gift and talent to them. And that's the whole idea, right? Of I think who God created us and perceives us to be as individuals, right? Is
Hmm.
that's the beauty of it, is that we are seen by God in a unique way, and we are created in a unique way, and nobody else is created the same way. So we all have call to creativity. It shows up differently for each and every one of us. But I think we all have a gift. I think sometimes, especially in a world that is as loud as ours, you start seeing the trends and you say, well, I'm not really good at that, so therefore I don't have those gifts. But truthfully, you have a lot of other gifts that probably are more important than the trendy ones, but
Hmm.
just is going to beyond that. So I think there's kind of discernment of stepping back and saying, well, okay, well, who God created me to be and for what purpose?
Hmm.
And I think then as you start entering into this conversation with yourself, you find yourself, well, I really have some unique gifts and talents that I don't think people around me have. And so how then I'm going to use them?
What a beautiful piece of advice there. Could you keep going on that? How do you talk somebody through or encourage them to start doing that? Because I think we often take the word creativity and assume that means, oh, that's painting and that's storytelling. Like this live stream and this channel is all about storytelling, but um, creativity is a lot more than that. I think the Holy Father, well, recent Holy Father Pope Francis would routinely talk about, what is it, the Holy Spirit's genius for creativity that is called to enter into all of our lives in all of our different ways. And I like how you just pointed out, I may have a way to be creative that nobody else around me does. Maybe keep going down that line. What sort of counseling or coaching um, do you share with others?
Well, the big thing, right, is a question of like freedom. Am I free to really step into, my unique vocation, my unique calling, right? And I think that's where there's a lot of struggle in today's world, right? Because especially the next, as I kind of keep watching, hear people at St. Clement who are very young, well, in right post college, and that's more than I would say 50% of the people who come here are in their early 20s, and so as I talk to them, they grew up with devices that I never knew, right?
Mhm.
And so they were shaped by technology the way I would never be shaped. They use technology for the things I would never think technology actually is helpful for. And so we have of that there's mutual learning that is possible. But what I think, especially watching Gen Zs and kind of studying Gen Zs and looking at this young generation, what I see is this longing for both a bigger perspective and freedom. Like, how do I regain
Mhm.
my own footing? Like, I don't want somebody's footing to become mine just because it's trendy. And I
Mhm.
think that there is this spiritual hunger for saying everything. I think you grow up in the world now of trends that come and go, and you see them all over, right? Social media and so forth. And
Mhm.
there's a trend that lasts a week if you're lucky, sometimes 2 weeks, and then it goes the next. And that's an exhausting thing for a young person. If you just try to be trendy,
Mhm.
I mean, you will just keep jumping from one thing to another. But you always will be slightly behind because somebody else will invent the next trend and it's not you. And so you,
Mhm.
you kind of always feel like you're catching up. And I think that's why being grounded in faith and in some sense of self-worth is extremely important because it kind of allows you to leave that space and kind of
Mhm.
say, well, I'm not going to be defined by that. I might participate in it. I might find great creativity in it, but that's not what defines me. What defines me is the relationship I have with God, with myself, with other people, and that is what fuels me. And the rest of it is just an additional thing. And I think people are looking for that freedom right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. Especially with well, my generation and younger. Um, uh, I think we've never been told that there is an idea like the idea of vocation. And when we do hear it, we assume it means something like, well, maybe marriage or family. But the concept is so much broader and it's so much more integral to every single human being, no matter what it is. And it's not just for who you get married to or what religious formation you go on to take. How do you define vocation? And maybe here's an interesting thought. So, how do you define it? And why do you think it might be not a rebellious act, but kind of a game-changing concept to reintroduce to the culture, especially with most young people believe that they don't matter and life has no meaning. And I think vocation completely turns that around.
Yeah, I really like that. I think, in many ways, vocation, right, is a unique, again, because God creates us in a unique relationship He has with us, right? He sees us for who we are. And what He sees, He loves because God loves. And so that's the first language of God, right? Is love. It's this creative love in which God gives us life through our parents, and then God pours more of that love that
Mhm.
creates and shapes us in the most unique ways. So that's why, if you really come to get to know God, what you come to discover is deeply yourself, right? Your own unique gifts and talents. And so finding your vocation, so somehow in this uniqueness of creation, God gives you the gifts and talents that will serve a specific pathway in your life. And then it's up to you, right? We're all created free, is to lean in into discovering what that pathway is. Now, what helps is that we have unique skills and talents that
Mhm.
God gives us, or pours into our hearts into saying, okay, I always think about this way, right? When we are small, and I remember when I was a small boy, like, sure, I was 4 and I thought I would be a pilot. And I was like, great, that's what I will be. And I think most of the people at the age of 4, it's a fair play. You actually can be a pilot. Like, the sky is the limit. By the age of 10, if you are not really excelling in center areas, you probably won't be a pilot. And by the age of 15, it's pretty much gone, right? So you start then discovering, like, oh, I had this great foolish idea, what became foolish idea,
Mhm.
because my skills are just not aligning with it, right? So I start
Right.
discovering my skills and saying, okay, the pilot is not a thing. Maybe it will be firefighter until you discover you're afraid of heights, and then it's like, oh, I probably won't be a firefighter, right? But so you start building on it, and I think it's this kind of God reveals gently and slowly the gifts and talents that you have. But I think you need to really step away into kind of searching, right? That's why silence is so important. And there's so little of it in today's world. But stepping away from the noise and saying, where am I most myself? Right? Where
Mhm.
do I feel the most affirm and call into who I believe God creates me to be, and then calls me into action. And then
Mhm.
you kind of look at your own abilities and say, okay, is it possible that I could be called to one of those five, pathways? And
Mhm.
so I think that's how you slowly start discovering that.
Mhm.
And the grace is always given as you keep going. There's more grace, and there's affirmation, right? People say, "Well, you're foolish," and then if 100 people tells you you're foolish, they might be all wrong. But there's a high probability, probably people who know you the best, if they say
Yeah.
there's no way you
Mhm.
could do that. They probably are right at one point, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So you start listening to the voices of the people you trust, who know you well, who know best for you, and you start looking into your own heart and say, okay, what are the synergies? What is God doing through other people, right? In the church, we call it the council of the saints, right? This is what Scripture talks about, which is the
Mhm.
community of the church. What is the church telling us? And then
Mhm.
what are we seeing in our own lives? And then together we come to discern the best pathway, right?
Mhm. Yeah. Father, tell us a little bit about what's your background? What's your story? How did you get to Chicago? I think I hear a bit of an accent, and your last name sounds Polish. Am I right?
You got it right. I'm Polish. I was born in Poland. I grew up in Poland. I moved here about 20, roughly 5 years ago,
Okay.
to Chicago. And I moved here to actually study in the seminary. That's why I came. And so I came with this mindset that I will stay here, which was interesting at that age to make that call. But I think once you young, you might much bolder than I would be right now. To tell you the truth, I probably would not make that decision in my 40s. But in your 20s, you're kind of like, that sounds fun. I'll just uproot my life and move to another part of the world. And I was ordained in 2008. And, I minister in a lot of different functions in the church here. And I'm a pastor here in Lincoln Park in the church that's called St. Clement, and it's a great community. And been here for 6 years now.
Wonderful. So, how did you get involved in this conference, Faith That Builds Worlds? I love that title. Um, how did you get involved with it, and did you give a presentation at it?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
To tell you the truth, I go to so many conferences and I speak at a number of them. I don't always appreciate uh, what they're all about. Sometimes I just zoom in for one or two gatherings that I would learn something. My
Mhm.
big thing right now is because my congregation is really young. My big thing is I think God is doing something incredible through this young generation. And I think there's more and more research from Barna and other places who say even though the young folks are the least practicing Christianity, they're the most committed ones and the ones who are the most open, searching. And so the question of the church then, it doesn't become are people searching? We actually know now clearly people are searching and the most open we've seen. I mean, something like 82% of people say they would go to church if somebody would invite them. So that's a crazy statistic, right? But the
Mhm.
question is when they come,
Right.
how will the church respond in a
Mhm.
pre Christian world where people have absolutely no idea about who God is, who church is, what kind of relationships we try to create? And so I try to learn in many different ways by listening to others. Like, first, how do they accompany people? Secondly, is how do they bridge this gap between where the world is, where the church is? And thirdly, is like how do you respond to this? What Augustine talked about, centuries ago, the restlessness of human heart. How do you allow people to recognize that restlessness is actually for God, and it can be fulfilled in the relationship
Mhm.
with Him in the church? And so that's mainly what I'm trying to figure out, and
Mhm.
listen to a lot of people who are much smarter, who have way more research in those areas to kind of say, okay, we see this working or that working, because then it helps, because it becomes, for the church right now, this becomes a test in obedience to God, right? Because we don't convert anybody; it's the Holy Spirit that is at work, and I think if you pay attention to a lot of church leaders, you clearly see that God is doing something quite new right now through young generation. And so the question for the church is not like, oh, are we creative enough to create something new? The question is, are we obedient enough to acknowledge that and actually act on it?
There's something
And so,
already happening. Yeah. Wow.
yeah, that's right. God is already doing something. We have
Mhm.
to respond. And quite frankly, we don't better screw it up. So it's just what I'm trying to learn,
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
not to screw it up.
Amazing. I love the tone of hope that you have with the younger generation and with the future. If you go online, uh, way too many of us will dismiss the next generation as a semi-lost cause. Obviously, we don't think so, but there are a lot of people who do, because maybe they have been over raised to or raised to over rely. on technology, and I find it so interesting how they're so many of them they're doing things in a trending way, like you say. New trends show up all the time, but what's funny is some of the trends are doing the kind of things you talked about, like rediscovering silence, rediscovering
Mhm.
complete tech reduction or
Mhm.
rejection, and
Yeah.
it's just funny to be learning all of these basic human things sort of backwards because our parents didn't give it to us. And so it sounds like you have a strong sense of hope about the future. And I love talking to people who have hope about the future. Uh, what is your hope? What is the reason for your hope? The hope that is in you
Well, I mean,
beyond.
if you're a Catholic, if you're a Catholic priest, I think you got to get back to Christ. In the end, a friend of mine, Bishop Sandy Miller, who is the Anglican bishop in London, he's retired now, but Sandy always says, Christ reigns. And I think that I've learned that, and I always say that in a time of turbulence in the world, in my community, in my own life, when I have to face it, difficulties or illness. Christ reigns, and the point is like he's not going to step away from reigning, and therefore there's always hope. He's the Redeemer, and he's at work through his Holy Spirit. So I'm hopeful, clearly, because of that. I think, I always say, I just finished writing this book about engaging Gen Zs in faith. And something that I've been thinking about in writing it was how, I was ordained in 2008 and I entered the seminar in 2001, a very long time ago, right? I mean, so many young people were born after I actually entered the seminar, which is kind of crazy. And, I came with a mindset that my job for the rest of my life will be to basically manage the decline of the church because the church has been
Oh,
declining
that
for so
what an
long.
awful.
And I went
Yeah.
to business school, right, at Northwestern, and all my classmates were in the jobs of growth, right? They worked for Googles of this world. They had big jobs. They surely were on a suite, C-suite levels, pathways because they send them to, this school to get MBAs. And there was me. And at one point, I remember sitting in a classroom after class and thinking, I think I'm the only person in this class whose job is to manage decline versus growth.
Oh
And
gosh.
that was kind of fairly depressing.
Yeah.
And I wrestled with it. And I now see over the last 3 years something I thought I would not see, which is this incredible movement of growth.
Mhm.
And so I wake up and I say, oh my gosh, there is something that God is doing that I didn't think God will be doing in my time, in my season, in the
Wow.
church and in the world. And so I think watching now movement from post-Christian to pre-Christian generations, seeing what is happening with Gen Zs and now Gen Alpha, which is 15 and younger, and the search for truth and all those things that you named, those trends, that
Mhm.
then shift from being trends to becoming personal practices of saying, I am actually better off when I cut off social media at 6 p.m. Like I have
Mhm.
so many people here at St. Clement who say to me, I started last year, for Lent, I gave up, anytime after 5 p.m., I don't do social media. And they said, I found so much more peace. I never get back to it.
Wow.
And that actually gives me so much more freedom and joy and bigger perspective. So I think that there is this absolute hunger now. I mean, I think what I hear also from young people is they look at their grandparents and parents and they say, boy, they're not all that happy. They might be very successful, but they don't seem to have peace and joy and freedom that I seek.
Mhm.
And therefore, how do I find it? And I think they're willing to try faith as a venue of finding it.
Amazing. I love this. That's fantastic. I think you're absolutely right. So, last closing question for you, um, possibly before our next guest jumps on, but this title of this conference, which I absolutely loved, and it sounds like it's so interesting to hear your take on what you just said, that you thought you were managing a decline, and now you're seeing it's in a stage of super growth.
Yeah.
I love that point of view. Part of my story is coming from a an apocalyptic doomsday cult within Catholic Church, and then leaving that, deconstructing out of that. So for me, it wasn't just a sort of managed decline. It was like next year is it. we're all out. We're all in trouble next year. And so I now reject all of that. And I'm like, nope, the story of the church has just begun. How can it not? And so I love talking to people who have hope about the future and everything. So the question for you is, when we say that it is a faith that builds worlds, I love the relentless, adventurous confidence in a concept like that. What do you think about that? What goes through your mind, especially as we think of the next generations? And here's where my question is sort of coming from. So many of us, I look at the culture, I see in them the same darkness that I had growing up. You don't matter. The future doesn't matter. You have nothing to contribute. Just take your bread in circuses and sit down and shut up and stay down. And then the church comes along and goes, nope, there's actually things like hope and vocations. And I love the metaphor of all of the darkness in the world can't put out the light of a single candle.
Mhm.
And so for us to then bumble backwards and clumsily into rediscovering old practices, ever ancient, ever new, and so on, it's so interesting. It's the first time we're doing this way. And so, yeah, a faith that builds worlds. What goes through your mind with that?
What's easy, for me to kind of interpret that, here in Lincoln Park in Chicago, one of our parishioners was Mother Cabrini, who is one of the first American saints.
Mhm.
And Mother Cabrini, of course, came from Italy as an immigrant, sent to the Pope. Her dream actually was to go, to Asia. And the Pope said, no, 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 you go to America because there's so many immigrants who need your help. And you have this woman who, at first barely speak English, who moves here and moves to the worst part of the city at that point and builds, Columbus Hospital, and then she builds another one in New York. She built something over 20 institutions, schools and hospitals across the United States. And and she did it because she was absolutely convinced that God wants to be present in this place of poverty and in this place of illness and desolation. And so, of course, it builds the world. You look at Mother Teresa of Calcutta, right, and the sisters continuing their work. You look at the amazing imprint of our predecessors, the saints, and you say, yeah, just it's hard to study history. I mean, there's a great book by uh, what's his name? It's called Dominion. Tom Holland, who is he has a great podcast, The Rest is History, and he's not Christian, but
I've
he
heard the
wrote.
name. Tell me, say more. Keep going.
Yeah, but Tom is a great, guy. We had him speak at the Alpha conference a few years back in
Mhm.
London at our leadership conference. And Tom wrote this book, Dominion, about Christianity, and it's a brilliant book. It's a thick book, but he actually basically says, listen, unless you're the most arrogant person in the world, of course it is Christianity that introduced all the things that we now today take for granted, like our longing for peace and our desire for social justice and our desire for empowerment. And he said, even the things that are not aligned with the church today, at the very root, were started by the Christian ethics, right?
Mhm.
Versus the Roman law, which actually would say, well, I don't care, if you're poor, what do I care about? It's fine, as long as I'm not poor. And then the Christianity comes in, and Jesus says, well, love your neighbor and love your enemies and share what you have. And then the culture of the world starts shifting, especially the Western world, right?
Mhm.
And
Yep.
so of course, it transforms the world. And I think, I might be naive, but I think just watching right now what's going on with young people, I think this will be one of the most um, transforming moments in the history of the world, not because of one individual, but I think there will be just this whole communion of young people who will choose to live differently and for whom Christianity will not be a faith, it will be a way of life that will inform how they think about the world and themselves and other people. And I think that slowly will start changing the fabric of every country and the way in which we see each other. And so, might be naive in it, but this would not be the first time and not the last time what God would do it. And I'm just filled with a lot of hope. And I think part of we are called to be people of hope, uh, and I think, yeah, it was just Pope Leo wrote a letter to priest, I believe, of Madrid recently. It was Barcelona or Madrid. It was somewhere in Spain for sure. And I read that letter. It was a lengthy letter for their
Mhm.
gathering. And it's brilliant. And basically, he says God is doing something new, especially with younger generation. And we have to pay attention, but we also have to discern how do we respond with Christian message in a post-Christian world in a way that captures the imagination of the people and helps them to see it as a way of life, right? Not just as a way of practicing something once a week, but a way that transforms their way. Because if they are transformed, then they will help to transform, like Mother Cabrini did, the lives of countless other people around the world, and the world will become a better place.
This is so exciting. I just realized that my schedule was completely wrong, and I still have you until 11:40. If you're able to stick around, I would love to understand. You just said something so interesting, and maybe this relates to your book. Is it in the first draft stage, or is it almost published, or do you have a copy of it?
It's, I'm not sure. I've never published a book, so I don't know what almost publish is. It's in the process of being published as we
I see.
speak.
Oh, how
So
exciting.
it will come up in 27, I think, because
Okay.
apparently one thing I've learned, it takes about a year to publish a book, even though it's ready.
Okay. Okay. So I love something you said, and I don't understand it enough, and I'd love to understand better. You said that this next generation has something like an incredibly unique contribution to, I think you said, like history, to this entire story in a way we've never seen before. Please help me understand that. That sounds incredible, and I love the hope and confidence there.
So there's a lot of different elements playing at the same time. One is
Hmm.
the access to information, right? It's just
Hmm.
we never had as easy of access, and obviously now with AI, people whether every answer is true, that's another question. But
Right.
people can have access to information very quickly, and so what I see now is people come. I had so many of those conversations last year when people come and say, do you work here? I'm like, yeah, I do. I don't wear a collar for just the fun of it. And they say, my name is John, and I've never been to church. I'm like, at church or any church? And they're like, I've never been to church building, but I've been doing the research online, and I want to become Catholic. And I'm like, okay, well, what is happening, right? And so you start actually seeing a lot of those stories where God actually is using technology
Hmm.
and all the power of social media and people influencing other people and all this stuff about with introducing his message, right? And so I think people are actually coming to faith online. I never thought that actually would say that. And so that's one thing that is significantly different. And so when they show up in a different place. Before, people show up and they had the longing of the heart. They might have done a little of research, but it was limited. And they came in and say, I know nothing and I want to learn. Now people say, oh, I've been reading church fathers for the last 3 years. And I just
Yes.
finished Augustine and now
Right.
I'm ready to become Catholic. I'm like, okay, well, this is a very different place clearly than we've been
Hmm.
in the past. And so I think that's one thing is people really are reading and researching way more. And
Hmm.
in this country, what I've learned is we had this kind of commingling of um, an easy language with a shallow explanations, right? And so uh, people, when they came to discern faith, might not have gone quite deep, and nobody kind of gave them the tools. Now the tools are all up there, and
Hmm.
so they're accessible to them. So what we find is that when people come, they already know much more and they jump in with 2 feet versus just putting a little bit their toes in. And so it's a different starting point. And that generates, I think, a whole lot of more of commitment than I've seen in the past. They really show up more, but they just don't show up to be entertained. I think they show up really with this deep longing of like how do I live a different life? How am I not so lonely? And because of social media, I think, having great positive but also great challenging piece to it is, you feel judged at every moment. Everything you say is pretty public. And you always are behind. And so you kind of go to bed feeling like a loser and you wake up as a loser because the world just keeps on moving. And so I think what I see people now doing is saying, I need an escape place, which actually creates a world or allows me to live in the world that is different. And I think now that's the shift, right, toward uh, Christianity. And in particularly, I think the studies would say the Orthodox faith or, or Catholicism are two places that people go because of the tradition, right? Because
Mhm.
they just love to lean in into something that we've been doing for 2000 years versus was a trend invented 2 weeks
Yep.
ago. And I think this whole idea of God who is faithful for generations and Jesus who has been present in a unique way in the church for 2000 years. I think that what I hear people take great peace in it and solace, and they say, okay, I am willing to learn that because that gives me some hope. If God was faithful to all those unfaithful people for 2000 years, even for my faithfulness, I will find him. I always say to young adults, you will not be a first person in the history of salvation God will stop loving or be unfaithful to. So I
Right.
think I think you're right. I think you loved and God will be faithful to you. And for so many people, this is the first time they heard that message.
Wow. Can you tell us a little bit about your book? What do you cover in the book? Where does it go?
So there's a number of things I'm trying to name in it. First is this movement from post-Christian to pre-Christian, and I think
So you
I've seen
said
it firsthand
post-Christian to pre-Christian?
pre-Christian.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
that's what I've seen first time. I first was introduced to it in London. There's this Anglican priest who's a friend of mine, Stephen Foster. He's a chaplain at Oxford, and Stephen kind of was the first one I heard speaking about London moving into pre-Christian culture. My father, my father, not my father, my friend, Father Rob Gallia, who's a Catholic priest in Australia, a musician. He says, in Australia we've been in uh, post-Christian and now pre-Christian world for about 5 generations.
Wow.
And so we really are removed from Christianity. And and so I kind of name what does it mean to live in a pre-Christian world, right? In a post-Christian world, when you look at Gen X, you look at millennials, you look at baby boomers, they know Christianity, they know the concepts, they know the parable of a good shepherd, the golden rule. People would say, "Oh, I know what golden rule is. I know what parable of a good shepherd is," um, but I'm not interested. I'm just not that interested. It might not be harmful. It's just not my cup of tea,
Mhm.
right? Versus in pre-Christian world, people would say, "I have no idea what you're talking about." I mean, I had a young person who come recently, and she said, "I've been having those dreams," and calling me to come to church. And I said, "Well, who is in all your dreams?" And she said, I asked that. And the voice said to me in my dream, "I'm the father of Jesus." And I'm like, "Have you heard of Jesus?" And she's like, "No." And she grew up in New York, right? So you actually start seeing that we really are in a very different cultural place. So I'm
Mhm.
naming that. I'm kind of trying to explain what pre-Christian world looks like and give some evidence of it. And then I'm shifting into saying, well, if people are coming from pre-Christian world, how would the church respond to it? And because if you come with zero knowledge and you cannot presume anything, right? And there's three significant shifts I'm naming, right? Movement from proclamation to conversation, from explanation to experience, and from individualistic faith to communal experience, communal faith. And so I'm talking through that, and then I'm kind of talking a little bit about Gen Zs and what I've seen in those people who are 15 to 25 now, what they're reacting to, what do they respond to, how do you minister to them, how do you help to accompany them from becoming customers of services to becoming a church in which they are co-responsible for her future, which is a very different thing because they grew up in a culture of instant gratification and everything being kind of given to them or service to them. And so
Mhm.
that's the mentality also they bring to the church, right?
Mhm.
I want you to provide all those nice things for me. And if I like, I will keep coming. It's like, no, no, no. You, the co-creator, you come and you start being part of it. Like being the church is not sitting in the pew. And that's a very new concept pre-Christian generation, and you have to be very gentle, very kind with it. But you also have to be very consistent in saying the church is not just showing up and praying rosary on your own. That is not what was the mind of Jesus. And I think the saints would be great examples to point out to say, yes, they pray, and then the prayer bore fruit in action, and the action brought fruit in helping other people and all that stuff. So this journey of conversion is a new thing to people.
That use of that word, you said co-responsible as opposed to gratification. Uh, what's their reaction when they hear that not just an institution of the church, but the community of the faithful
Yeah.
that is the church is looking at them and asking them, we are inviting you up here to be co-responsible with this mission and with everything that this is. How do they react when you talk to them about this?
I think the first step is creating a place in which people feel safe to actually experience it, right? Like here at St. Clement, we're on Alpha course. It's an 11-week course. It's kind of a small group approach. But the beauty of it is people are getting to know for who they are. And they create deep friendships within a church. And so their starting point is not me preaching at them. Their starting point is saying, oh, that's what church is. Oh, wait, church is I'm heard and I'm noticed for who I am, and people know my name, and I know my other people's names. And now I have this community that actually matters in my life. And once they go through that process, they're ready to hear
Mhm.
what does it mean to live that out, right? So
Right.
that's the important first element. You got to start with creating a sense of community and belonging when people feel noticed and appreciated and encouraged and known by somebody. And only then they're ready. I think one of the big mistakes I see in church happening is people don't do that. They just do the teaching, the proclamation
Mhm.
before the conversation.
Mhm.
And they want to explain something that people never experience. And so there's a very different, you get it. I mean, there's a difference, right, Dominic, between uh, talking in a concept about love and truly feeling loved by someone.
Right. Right.
Well, the same thing applies to faith, right? And so you want people to say, "Well, we want you to believe." You go through creed. I believe in God, the Father Almighty. Do they have experience of the Father? Do they know who the Father is? Do they have evidence of Father searching intimately for them in their life when they struggle? And then it goes to all those people, so the Son and the Holy Spirit. So I think you have to start with community belonging. Once that's unpacked, you can go to teaching and instruction, but you cannot start with teaching and instruction. People will leave
Mhm.
because they're not ready for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Goodness. This was fascinating, Father. Gosh, closing thought, I think, as we wrap up this conversation, my next guest is coming on. But one thing that does seem obvious to me is that there are a number of things that are essential to being human. And I think a lot of the next, well, younger generation, and even a lot of my generation, were never given a bunch of those experiences. And uh, the moment you reintroduce some of those, it's almost like you suddenly wake up and realize, oh, this is so good and this is so real. It almost becomes like an addiction. You can't get enough of it. It's like you finally found a sense of freedom, maybe a sense of purpose, and you just don't want to do anything else but continue doing it. And everything else suddenly feels flatter and thinner. Um, uh, do you have like a program or something based on your book that you take these young people through to reconnect them or re-engage them before you get into, like you say, the catechesis and the proclamation?
Yeah, we have we call it a pathway of engagement, but it's very simple, right? It's just first showing them that they matter to God. And if they matter to God, they have to matter to the church. And that's the first movement, right? And secondly is that God cares for them. And so again, uh, we use kind of alpha as our entry point. And after 11 weeks of that, they really develop A relationships, they have the experience. And then post that, we have beta courses that take them a little bit deeper in the life groups in which they kind of meet every month and accompany each other. But the whole idea, right, is that Jesus didn't mean this to be individualistic. He wanted to have a community, and a very large church like mine, you only can do it through small groups because,
Right.
when you come to church and there are thousands of people, you just cannot feel seen and having impact. But when you go away from it, you start seeing
Mhm.
that happening.
Yeah, yeah, amazing. We've got a question here from the chat. I'll bring up. You have to put it up on screen here. So I think it's Victor. Victor says, "How many of the next generation that is seeking connection with Christ is coming from no tradition of faith, or is in positive or negative response to what they grew up with? What's your experience?"
Oh, that's a great question. I think there's, I'm not a national expert on statistics. So I don't know what that looks like across the church. What I know is what I see in the studies and what I see here at St. Clement. So it's very subjective. So take it as such. Um, what we see here at St. Clement is that there's a very large number of people who just have no experience at all of God or of the church. And so this is the first time. And then the second group that is very large is the people from non denominational churches who are coming and they say, and it's not because they didn't like the church that they went to. They say, I had an incredible experience of the church. I want more of the church. And as I've been studying it, the structure of the Catholicism seems like I'm more attracted to because of the ritual and because of, the spirituality and the saints and the things that we have over the last 2,000 years. So I think it's those two groups that we've been seeing here at St. Clement that have been, traditionally before that were like mainline Protestant groups that we are losing people to and we are gaining people from. Now it seems to be non-Christians whatsoever and non-denominational Christians.
Yeah, I think your point is so fascinating about this is such a new time in history with a completely new experience of how we do everything. Like you said, with AI and all of this information online, people would people would walk away and continue to because of um, bad experiences or awful things that do happen, and they have good reasons to feel kind of like you said, unwanted or like they don't matter. But now this is the first time where it's not just about going down to the local library or trying to schedule time with someone to answer their questions. They can get almost everything answered online. They can go so much faster and further and deeper than ever before. And that's such an interesting observation that when they do turn around and choose to make a commitment, sometimes it can be in spite of their experiences, um, which is an
Mm-hmm.
amazing uh, place to be. Maybe a place of really incredible humility or openness or boldness. But yeah, there's a chance now to be so much more informed, which can help their conversation and help that the building up or the re-engagement with the community. And like you say, church, it seems the church is working really, really quickly. The institution, the hierarchy, recognizing that what has worked needs to be updated because the world has moved so fast. I don't mean like changing of the teachings, but it's restructuring how it's presented or how it's used to engage with people who are in a completely different place. It's the first time we've been in a pre-Christian sort of state in the world, First World West. Um,
Yeah,
wow. So
it's a
your
new
book
place
is,
for us.
yeah, your book is a year out.
Um, Hopefully not a full year, but it
Okay,
will take a while, I've learned.
amazing. I can't wait to get my hands on a copy when it does come out. So I hope that we can stay in touch.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thanks for having me. I mean, what a great conversation. So I appreciate your time.
No, it's absolutely my pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on. Um, what I will do after this live stream is I'll clip out our conversation and post it up on the channel, and I'll send you a link, and you can have a look at that. But thank you for your work and your ministry, and thanks for coming on. And again, I hope your book does well. It sounds like a fantastic, encouraging um, message. So thank you again for coming
Well,
on.
in the end, as I started with, it's more so active obedience, right? When you see things happening,
Yeah,
it's good to
yeah,
name them for the sake of others. And if it's helpful, it's good. If it's not helpful,
hmm
I did what I'm supposed to do, and that's
yeah,
fine.
yeah.
All
Amazing.
right,
Well,
take
thank
care.
you.
Thank you
All right.
so much.
Have a
Bye
wonderful rest
bye.
of your day. God bless you. All righty, friends on the live stream. We've got our next Next guest is supposed to be hopping on. He may be having a hard time. Um, Give him another couple of minutes, and then if he's not able to make it, let me go check my inbox and see if he actually messaged me. Give me a second here. Wasn't that an interesting conversation? Hey, Victor, thanks for some cool comments in here. I recognize not everybody following us is religious, maybe, or even Catholic at all, but it's pretty cool to get different conversations with different people. Alrighty. Let me send my next guest a quick email. Hi there. We are good to have you join us on the call. We just resend the invite link. And so Ken's got a new book. Hopefully we'll be able to chat with him. That's a funny, what is this comment? You said, Victor, Catholicism is the vinyl records of religion. Young people are excited to have more defined structure. Yeah, that's funny. Um, it does have that feel, doesn't it? I think it's, yeah, that does run into the problem of it being a trend, because in about 10 years there will be a thing, or by the next generation vinyl records won't continue to be a thing because nobody will have the nostalgia anymore. And a faith or a tradition based around nostalgia is probably going to have problems because it's got to be alive. All right, just going to give our friend a couple of minutes, and otherwise, if he doesn't show up, I'm going to start screen sharing, and I'm going to go back and have a look at this very cool other talking points. We'll just give him a minute. Hey, are you writing anything lately? Have you had a chance to write a story recently? A new chapter in your book? If you have, type the number 1 in the chat. This is a storytelling podcast. After all, let's talk stories for a second. What are you writing? What's your word count? How's it going for you? On my end, this past week, oh, it was last week, technically. I didn't do a live stream last week. I was just tired. And instead, I wrote a short story, about 2 to 3,000 words, posted it on my blog. I think it's very fun. I've had like 1 or 2 people read it, and they also thought it was very fun. So there you go. It is fun. No, it's called Warlock Tactical Academy. It was crafted for um, it's a short story collection, short story anthology that I'm running through Legend Fiction, and it's called Fell Semester. The idea is, can you survive a semester or a season at a magical school? A bit like Harry Potter, but sort of grown up, I guess, or with grown up themes, something like that. And so I thought, well, it would be really cool to kind of mash up a police training academy with Hogwarts. What would that look like? And then how could I create the most dramatic opening, maybe opening chapter or just short story, to paint the world and to have fun with it? Have you seen Bright? I thought the movie Bright by Will Smith had such a fun potential idea. I kind of wish that they'd actually stayed a lot more in the fantasy side, as opposed to, what is that city called? Flint City or something? Um, yeah, just sort of the grit of the whole world. I kind of wish they leaned a little bit more into um the cool sort of magic undertones or underworld of that movie. I wish they made a sequel to it. I've never read the comics. I think it's based on comics. Anyway, all right. Looks like our friend may not be joining us, which is a shame. Might have to get him. Well, he says he is on. Oh, there. I don't have you in the live stream studio. Can you refresh and try again? All right. Maybe he is actually able to jump on. Let's give him another minute. Anyway, so yeah, I wrote a short story. I think it's very fun. I think if you just Google my name, you'll probably find my blog, Dominic DeSouza. Or if you're following Legend Fiction, you can hit my profile. All right. Let's see. So Ken Lizzie. Lizzie. Maybe he's Italian. So he's got a new book out. We're going to chat about that. Hopefully he can make it on. You know what? I'm going to step away just for a second and I will be right back. All right, friends, welcome back. Looks like our next guest was not able to jump on and join us, which is a little bit sad. What I'm going to do is corner him and we'll pre-record the conversation and then just share it afterwards. So for some reason, there's like some sort of a glitch or a problem. All right. So let's talk about something that I worked on over this past week. So I found an article, it was on Substack. And the article, which it's going to be linked in the um, post that I'll put under this video. And hold on, first follow-up comment from Victor here. My vinyl records comment was not so much nostalgia, but rediscovering something that has been lost and thinking it's new and something they discovered. Well, that's true too. Good call. There's that, yeah, that funny line from Augustine that Father referenced: "Ever ancient, ever new. The wheel turns." Anyway, so I've got uh, I created a new tool to help authors because there's this fun article that I found on Substack. And so let me pull up and screen share. If you're an author, right? If you're an author, your own personal story is potentially massive and it's fascinating and it's interesting. But nobody has any idea what that is. And if you're like most of us authors, you're trying to focus on pushing your books and get people excited about your books. But there's a missed opportunity around you yourself are part of the excitement, part of the process. So this is a little bit of marketing advice that may be helpful. And then I've created a tool that is linked or that's included so that you can go and test it out yourself. So let me move, can I move this around? There we go. Okay, this is the post, and I'm just going to read it aloud because it ended up being pretty fun. Let's fill this on my screen here. Authors, your story is huge. So why is your introduction so small? When you meet an author, those of us who are readers, we're kind of expecting or hoping for a legend, somebody epic, somebody amazing. And writers keep doing this odd little trick where they spend 300 pages right? Summoning dragons, revolutions, and the end of the world, and then introduce ourselves like we're a mildly competent stapler. That doesn't sound like any of us at all, does it? We share our name, our credentials, a safe adjective or two, nothing that might alarm the locals. We're boring, we're safe, we're normal. And then we wonder why nobody remembers them. So this article that I found on Substack, it's linked at the end of this post here, where the author was sharing this fascinating tidbit. Now, I think it was turn of the century. There was an author who tried self-publishing, and they did not sell many books at all. I don't know, maybe it was 200 copies. And they were then picked up by a publishing company. And what the publishing company did is they mythologized the author themselves. Because what they kind of grokked or they guessed was that if people think that the person creating the content is interesting, then people might actually have more interest in the content. So maybe they colored outside the lines a little bit. They maybe bent the truth a little bit and over exaggerated some things, and they turned him into a larger than life character. They mythologized this figure. And then because of that, the books then went on to sell something like 200,000 copies. Again, links in the description of this post. You can go check it out. Whether it's true or not, that just scratched an itch and it just got me fascinated. And I thought, what if we authors could lean into this? So think about a reader who has just read your books, right? Maybe they've just discovered you on Kindle, which is kind of how I was. I find random books and then I go and I read the author bios and they're like, right? Boring as anything. So a reader has walked through through fire. That's what it feels like after getting through an incredible book. They have seen impossible things. They have come up or come out on the other side expecting to meet the sort of person who would willingly build such a Narnia and live in it for years. And instead, they meet a desk clerk. That's a mistake. A novelist is already a suspicious and fascinating creature, right? You have chosen repeatedly to spend your life making things that don't exist until they do, which is the sort of behavior that would have worried your ancestors. You kept going when there was easier work available. You followed threads that led nowhere and you called that progress. You listened to voices that never once offered to help with the rent, just because they were interesting and they called themselves Aragorn. There's nothing minor about this, and yet the story you tell about yourself is usually the smallest one available. If a stranger were to write your life as a character, they would not begin with your degree and your fondness for coffee. How many websites have you gone to where people make a statement like X number of coffees drunk in this thing? And I'm like, it's kind of funny until the 200th time you've seen that. Um, if you had a stranger writing about your life, they would start with the long, stubborn line running through your years and say, that is the real story. Everything happens because of that. From a higher vantage, right? From a higher vantage point, trying to look at your life from an eagle eye view, 30,000-foot view, the pieces then start to line up. The early obsession that you have becomes part of your origin moment. The abandoned projects become evidence of an appetite instead of like a graveyard of failed projects behind you, which is how I used to think about all of my failed projects. No, they're indications of an appetite. They're evidence of a desire or of a skill, a developing skill. The odd detours, those weird side quests that you went on, the books that you half started writing, that acquires new meaning. And you begin to look less like a person who likes writing and actually more like a person on a mission because you're just not quitting. And that's actually closer to the truth. Now, I get it. There is a fear here. Talking about like in a self-aggrandizing way, it can sound like vanity, it can smell like ego, and it can threaten to become one of those dreadful performances where someone declares themselves important and waits for applause. Have you seen those social media? Well, that's not what this is. That's not what I'm talking about. To mythologize yourself is to accept the actual size of the thing you've been doing and to speak from there without apology or inflation. It does require a kind of humility that almost feels backward, especially when you have been trained by a culture or a community that tells you to shut up, sit down, and stay down. To actually stand up and go, I think I'm awesome. I think more people should know about the things that I am passionately in love with. Maybe they will think I'm awesome. That's up to them. I'm going to keep doing this whether anybody likes it or not. It requires a kind of humility that almost feels backward. You step aside from the small, polite version of yourself and allow the larger version that you're in love with to step forward, the part that actually captures our imaginations. You're not adding anything. I think that's pretty important to say. Don't add anything, but stop subtracting. Readers respond to that. How couldn't they? Not just readers, anybody, humans, people, right? We recognize someone who's been shaped by the same forces that shaped the book that they read and maybe fell in love with. Someone who did not arrive by accident. So here's your challenge: take your life out of the filing cabinet, put it on the table, the whole thing. Sometimes you're going to do this over and over and sort of tweak it year after year as new parts of your life come into alignment and you begin to see, oh, this is why I was doing this thing at this time. And sometimes it just takes a while for stuff to make sense. But you got to start somewhere. So put on the table, right? Everything, the parts that you hid, the dreams you were half ashamed of because they felt too big for you. Stare at them long enough, maybe, or talk them over with a friend until you start to notice what's the pattern, what's the shape that they come together. It's a bit like footprints crossing the same patch of ground over and over again. That was you coming into focus. It's like one of those horrible, at least it was horrible for me, those stereograms from like when I was in school, where you'd take one of those books, right, and you would shove it up in your face and then slowly pull it away, trying to keep your eyes unfocused to see this sort of 3D picture kind of emerge out of this horrible, weird kaleidoscope. It's just so trippy. Same sort of thing that we're trying to do here is like put everything down. Like, what starts to emerge? Do I like that? Maybe I do, and I've been avoiding talking about that. So you keep calling it writing as though it were a hobby that got out of hand. Heck, if you're someone like Victor, who's probably still watching in the chat, it is not a hobby that got out of hand. If you're someone like me, like, my goodness, it's a vocation, it's a life path, it's something serious that really matters. It is a thread in the dark that keeps pulling you back when other more sensible paths presented themselves with things like proper salaries and grayish chairs that match. There's something in you that refused the comfortable, I'll just do it next year, next time, something in you refused. Here you are, and you're still circling that same interior fire. So let's stop pretending it's a small thing that you do on the side of your real life. This is part of the shape of your life. You do not lack belief. You have been acting on belief for years already. You sat down, you created, you came back, you tried again. You know, many people don't ever do any of this at all. You have yeah, people with belief without belief do not do that. They find something easier and then they call it wisdom. You've been looking at your life from maybe too close. Like your nose is pressed up to the glass, seeing only smudges and fingerprints and the occasional disappointed reflection. Okay, take a step back. Far enough to try to see the shape of your life. There's a person there who keeps choosing the harder road. Frankly, the kind of person that I admire, somebody who does that. That person deserves a clearer introduction. So when you speak about yourself, do not start with the safe details, maybe like your degree and all of your accomplishments. Start with the adventurous, interesting thing that keeps happening. And this time, stop hiding it. Now, if all of this sounds like, wow, I love this idea that's so interesting, what the heck do I do? Some of us are creative enough to actually just sit down, open a blank document, and just start typing it out and then workshop it. Not all of us are. I'm not exactly that way. I need somewhere to start. So I've built a chat tool, a GPT with OpenAI, and it's called Mythic Me. So you just hit that button, and what you do is take your existing bio that might be on your about page or you've put in the back of your book, or you just brained up everything you can think about yourself. And you drop it all in. Or if you're already online, you just want to sort of see how this does. You know those roast me um, apps that used to be all the rage? Well, this is not. This is like that, but the good kind. This is the mythic me. Um, Not a roast. It's a. I don't know, it builds you up instead. You can put in your website and it will then search your website. If you've got like a nice about page on it, it'll then do a quick maybe search online if there's not enough there, or it'll just do its best with what you give it. And it'll try to understand who is the kind of person inside the story that you've given it and what motivates them and what is the most interesting way to think about the work that you do. And then it'll try to rewrite that bio for you. I've used this myself. I had it run 3 to 4 different times because chat obviously has a way of writing that isn't awesome. Um, I like the comment, you take the output and you just take a crowbar to it, and so that's what I did, and I took, like, the best parts from its sense of my story, and I put it together, and then I went word by word, and I rewrote it for myself, and that's now sitting on my about page, and, if you're on this blog post, you can scroll down to the bottom and there's a bunch of different man, we got 20 comments on here. This thing has just taken off relative to my level of success on Substack. This is an all-star. Um, I think my little bio, it's linked down right in here. So you can go read that if that is interesting to you. There's a couple of people in here who took their simple little, um, Amazon bios, dropped it in and got something incredible. So I'll just show you what the GPT tool looks like. Where did it go? Here. We'll go like this and then share this tab. Even if you don't have a paid chat account, you should be able to test this for free. And then, of course, create a profile to be able to keep it. But as you can see, it says create my biopic from my website, study it for 30 seconds before replying. This helps it to avoid moving too quickly and just speed replying. And so it then says, send me your website URL and I'll study it closely before writing the biopic. Um, give it a go. And if it's helpful to you, let me know because, hey, I'd like to read your story. And if you think it's particularly cool and you end up going and using it on your about page, well, come and drop the link in the description, in the comments of this video. I would love to go read your story. And if mythologizing you is something that you found fun and helpful, then well, good. I hope that it helps you to sell more books. Because again, I think it is a way to try to be more honest about the fact that you are probably an epic human being, whereas we would call them in our community a legend. You're doing something that nobody else is doing. You're creating something that other people somewhere out there are going to enjoy. Quite frankly, you're doing something that feels absolutely impossible, which is taking an idea and fictionalizing it and turning it into an experience that can impact and inspire somebody else's life or give them a few hours of absolute fun and games. There are not a lot of us out here getting up to this sort of thing. So the story that you have for your own life matters as a part of this. So if you have not yet seen this, you can head to have a look at the link in the description after this live stream. I'll drop it in there. You can go have a read of this article. You can go test it out. I'll drop the link to the GPT as well. You can give that a go. And if you end up, again, like I say, remythologizing, I would love to hear what you end up creating and writing. Maybe if it just tickles you because it's funny, you can actually see one of the mentors in my community named Mary. She went and did this herself, and she took her bio and she just added it to her blog post. It's like, oh, look at this interesting output I got from this thing. So it's not complete, sort of buy in because she's happy with what she has, but it's a fun sort of test. Maybe that's something that uh, can help your readers change how they think about you a little bit. Because if you can go from, like, again, being a professionally qualified stapler, which is how I would routinely write my LinkedIn profile, if you can go from that to being Jack London, right? When I learned a little bit about Jack London's profile and how he backpacked or rode the rails all over, like, I have no idea, this has been 15, 20 years, all over like the Yukon or up and down these, the gold rush, I think it was, the adventurousness of this guy's life. And then when I realized that is what led to all of the books that he ended up writing, that's incredible. Now, if you're like me and you sit in a room and you work remote and you don't get out maybe very much, your story is going to be completely different. Your story might be a whole lot more internal rather than experiential. Doesn't mean it can be any less boring. It might just mean uh, grab a friend or maybe just grab chat and mess around with it and see if it can help unlock a more interesting and adventurous view of yourself. Guarantee, like, again, it's free advice. If it doesn't work, you can ask for a 100% refund on my free advice. But I guarantee it will be easier for people to connect with you. You will feel a little more confident about yourself. Quite possibly, people like agents or book publishers or people who've invited you to speak or be on podcasts are going to enjoy reading this bio aloud a lot more. And your potential readers will now sit up straight and they'll be like, maybe I need to follow this author as a human being, as a person, not just because they put out these books, but this person themselves seems to be interesting. Tell me what you think. I hope that it's a helpful tool. I think it's a helpful and interesting idea. And I hope that it helps you to sell more books. And I hope you have a more interesting and adventurous life. So, as what is that? Dos Equis guy goes, stay thirsty, my friends, right? Stay creative, stay storytelling, and I will see you hopefully next week. Cheers.